Reflections on the Good News of Jesus Christ for the 16th Sunday of Ordinary Time from the Gospel according to Matthew. Jesus proposed another parable to the crowds, saying, "The kingdom of heaven may be likened to a man who sowed good seed in his field. While everyone was asleep, his enemy came and sowed weeds all through the wheat, and then went off. When the crop grew and bore fruit, the weeds appeared as well. The servants of the household came to him and said, 'Master, did you not sow good seed in your field? Where have the weeds come from?' He answered, 'An enemy has done this.' His servants said to him, 'Do you want us to go and pull them up?' He replied, 'No. If you pull up the weeds, you might uproot the wheat along with them. Let them grow together until harvest. Then, at harvest time, I will say to the harvesters, First, collect the weeds and tie them in bundles for burning, but gather the wheat into my barn.' Jesus proposed another parable to them. The kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed that a person took and sowed in a field. It is the smallest of all the seeds. Yet when full grown, it is the largest of plants. It becomes a large bush, and the birds of the sky come and dwell in its branches." He spoke to them another parable. "The kingdom of heaven is like yeast that a woman took and mixed with 3 measures of wheat flour until the whole batch was leavened." All these things Jesus spoke to the crowds in parables. He spoke to them only in parables to fulfill what had been said through the prophet, "I will open my mouth in parables. I will announce what has lain hidden from the foundation of the world." Then, dismissing the crowds, he went into the house. His disciples approached him and said, "Explain to us the parable of the weeds in the field." Jesus replied, "He who sows good seed is the Son of Man. The field is the world, the good seed the children of the kingdom. The weeds are the children of the evil one, and the enemy who sows them is the devil. The harvest is the end of the age, and the harvesters are angels. Just as weeds are collected and burned up with fire, so will it be at the end of the age. The Son of Man will send his angels, and they will collect out of his kingdom all who cause others to sin and all evildoers. They will throw them into the fiery furnace, where there will be wailing and grinding of teeth. Then the righteous will shine like the sun in the kingdom of their Father. Whoever has ears ought to hear." The good news of the Lord. One of the first rules of being a public speaker is to know your audience. Jesus certainly did. His first-century audience was comprised primarily of shepherds, farmers, fishermen, and housewives. And he told stories, we call them parables, that clearly spoke to his listeners. Stories such as those we have heard today. Perhaps they will speak to you, too. Some years ago, I lived in an apartment where a small balcony gave me the space to grow a few plants. Once, when I was watering them, I noticed a tiny sprout that didn't look like a weed. So I decided to leave it alone and see what would come of it. It didn't take long before I realized that what was growing was indeed not a weed, but rather the beginning of a redwood tree. Its tiny seed, actually smaller than a mustard seed, having drifted on the wind from a grove of redwoods not far away, themselves more than 200 feet tall. God gave that tiny seed all that it needed to grow into a towering giant of a tree, far bigger than any mustard plant. Just as God has given each of us all that we need to grow into God's loving family, caring deeply for each other and for the world around us. Yes, attention is necessary, and care must be taken, just as with plants. What seeds has God planted in you? How are they doing? Many years ago, when I was a young lad, I would watch my mother prepare bread, mixing the ingredients together before placing the dough in a large bowl and covering it with a towel to leave overnight. And the next morning, I would be amazed to see the dough having risen to fill and almost overflow the bowl, what seemed like magic having been caused by just a tiny packet of yeast. I think I liked the explanation of magic more than the chemistry lesson I eventually learned. Notice, it didn't take a lot of yeast to make a big difference. And that's the message for us. We're to be like that yeast, making a difference in our families and our world because of who we are and how we live, because we are followers of Jesus who strive to live as he has taught us. These parables that describe his kingdom tell us that we're called to be kingdom people, making the kingdom of God a bit more real in our homes and in our society, like yeast in bread. And then there's those weeds. The servants in the parable were quick to want to get rid of them, but the farmer knew better. The particular weeds that infest wheat fields, for the botanists among us they are called zizania, those are very difficult to distinguish from the wheat, especially in the early stages of growth. And so, attempting to pull up the one may result in uprooting the other. Better to leave them alone until harvest time, when it's easy to tell them apart. That way, the farmer gets a yield of weeds that he can burn as fuel, and also a harvest of wheat that becomes his family's food. Wheat and weeds, good and evil, coexist in us too, in our world, our church, and ourselves. Nothing and no one is perfect. Not only that, as we mature as humans and Christians, we may well discover that what we thought was one is actually the other. So don't get too discouraged if you haven't yet managed to rid yourself of the weeds in your life, because they may not be weeds at all, just as what you thought was wheat may prove not to be wheat. All of which underscores the importance of not judging others, or for that matter, ourselves. As Jesus clearly states, the task of judging my life or anyone else's is not mine to do, nor is it to be done now. Echoing the words of Pope Francis, who am I to judge? And speaking of judgment, listen to this message from the Book of Wisdom. For your might, God, is the source of justice. Your mastery over all things makes you lenient to all. And the message is repeated a few lines later. But though you are master of might, God, you judge with clemency, and with much lenience you govern us. In other words, God exercises divine power through forgiving our offenses. How different God is from us. In our world, power is meant to be used. What good would power be if it was not used? And especially power over others. God uses power too, by being patient, merciful, and forgiving. In other words, God does not give us what we deserve. Thank God for that. Well, then, why bother trying to improve? Get rid of our weeds. Be better persons and Christians. Because the joy of life comes from our efforts at, using Jesus' image, making the kingdom of God a bit more real. This requires a bit of explanation. Kingdom in the gospel does not refer to a place either here or hereafter, nor is the kingdom the same as the church. It is primarily an environment, a set of relationships, a situation where God's values prevail. And what are God's values? In practice, they are the deepest human values and aspirations as mirrored in the life of Jesus, who is himself the revelation of God to us in human form. These values include truth, love, compassion, justice, a sense of solidarity with all other human beings, a sense of trust in one another, a deep respect for the dignity of every human person. And of course, all these are seen in the light of God, who is their ultimate source. It is to be like God and with God that we live according to these values. They, with and through Jesus, are our link with the one Jesus calls Abba, Father. People who individually and collectively try to live these values belong with Jesus to the kingdom of God. And by the way, such people may or may not belong to the church. As St. Augustine wrote centuries ago, there are those whom God has that the church does not have, and there are those the church has who God does not have. Kingdom people are united with the rule of God in trying to build a world we would all like to see happen. It is very much something for the here and now, or as Jesus himself said, the kingdom of God is at hand, not somewhere over the rainbow, but here at hand. And there is another dimension to this that may escape our attention. It has to do with that tiny mustard seed, or redwood seed, or that little bit of yeast. Father John Kavanaugh explains it this way. We are so afraid of our smallness. In our society, big is better. What is large is impressive. The grand is good. The small seems weak, vulnerable. But thinking in this way, we fail to see the wisdom of life, the promise of smallness, the world not of mere matter, but of spirit. Have we not all felt the grace that rises from the least? The free smile of a child, the first kiss, the initial act of kindness that gives birth to a friendship, the fragile promise made with a full heart. Each of us, so inconsequential in history's chamber, so lost in vast spaces measured by light years, bears a power not quantified by size, status, or society's standards. The human heart, small and frail by cosmic standards, rises to heights out of its very frailty when it loves, hopes, and believes. This is what the kingdom of God is all about. And it is in our hearts that God's Spirit moves. To borrow a few poetic lines, if you reverence and respect all life, if you can forgive and forget, if you wish peace to all and to none harm, if you do not judge, criticize, or condemn, you have God's heart beating in your body. Thanks for listening. Please share this with others if you like, and consider subscribing to this weekly gospel reflection. There's no cost. You can do that at www.justanother.disciple.com. Once again, www.justanother.disciple.com. Thanks again.